Susan E. Schwartz, The Absent Father Effect on Daughters. Father Desire, Father Wounds. What happens to a daughter when the father she longs for is absent, not just in body, but in presence, care, or emotional availability? Paternal absence can leave a deep imprint on a woman's inner life. It's a silent inheritance that may shape her identity, relationships, and self-worth for decades. Drawing on Jungian psychology, dream analysis, myth, and literary insight, this blink will take you into the archetypal layers of the father-daughter bond. You'll meet women who've lived with the quiet ache of abandonment and see how their psyches mirror broader cultural wounds. Along the way, you'll learn how the dead father effect, the idealized father complex, and the silencing of the feminine contribute to psychic fragmentation. But also how, when brought into awareness, those same forces can become catalysts for healing. When the father is absent. In Greek myth, King Agamemnon was punished by the goddess Artemis for killing a sacred deer. To appease her, Agamemnon was told to sacrifice his daughter, Iphigenia. Instead of telling her the truth, he tricked Iphigenia into coming to the port by promising marriage to the hero Achilles. There at port, Iphigenia discovered the horrific reality. Her father had chosen his military ambitions over her life. This ancient tale reveals a psychological pattern that continues today. Countless daughters still find themselves sacrificed on the altar of their father's absence. They're betrayed by their father's distance, indifference, and failure to be present. Father absence doesn't necessarily mean psychological abandonment. Many daughters grow up with fathers who are physically present but emotionally unavailable. They may be successful and charismatic in public, but cold and dismissive at home. The result is a daughter who learns that her needs don't matter, that she shouldn't ask for too much, and that she's only valued for her achievements. Often, the daughter is left searching anxiously for a connection that never materializes. She may blame herself for the lack of relationship, accepting responsibility for something that was never within her control. These patterns reflect broader cultural wounds that pass from father to daughter like an inherited illness. Many absent fathers are themselves the product of emotionally unavailable fathers. It's a persistent cycle. Plus, Western culture has historically undervalued the father-daughter relationship. Even Carl Jung, despite having 4 daughters, wrote only one essay specifically about fathers. This collective blind spot has left countless daughters suffering in silence. Jade's story illustrates these inherited patterns. Her father left when she was 3. As a teen, she tried to reconnect, but he showed no interest. In adulthood, Jade buried her longing in her work. Her partner, like her father, made her feel as though she constantly had to prove her worth. So she worked 100-hour weeks while maintaining a carefully constructed facade of okayness. A key impact of father absence is the daughter's loss of both healthy aggression and desire. These are the forces that drive self-knowledge and creative expression. Lacking a father's emotional affirmation, a daughter may become hyper-aware of others' needs while suppressing her own. Many become either hyper-vigilant people-pleasers or emotionally shut down. Not all father stories end in absence, of course. A reasonable father provides a secure foundation through consistency and emotional attunement. He shows genuine interest in his daughter's inner world, fosters her development, and provides a model for how she can expect to be treated by others. Such fathers help daughters develop self-confidence, perform better academically, and avoid risky behaviors. The ghost in the psyche. Imagine a father looking directly at his daughter and seeing nothing. His gaze passes through her like she's made of glass. There's no warmth, no recognition, just a blank stare. This image captures what psychoanalyst Andre Green called the dead father effect. It describes how emotionally disconnected fathers create daughters who absorb this psychological deadness and lose their vitality in the process. The dead father doesn't have to be physically absent. He might even sit at the dinner table every night. But mentally, he's checked out, depressed, preoccupied, or unable to connect. His disengagement transfers silently to his daughter, leaving her with a haunting sense of invisibility. Over time, she stops expecting to be seen at all. This psychological deadness drains a daughter's life force. Green describes it as psychic impotence, a state of endless internal monotony. Daughters affected by it often drift through life in a fog of boredom, anxiety, or creative paralysis. Their minds repeat the refrain, "I can't," or "it won't work." They lose faith in their instincts, feel detached from desire, and struggle to make decisions. Shiloh's story demonstrates how deep this damage can run. Her father left when she was 3, and in the years that followed, she developed a compulsive mirror-gazing habit. She'd stare at her reflection, searching her face for flaws and self-harming in order to fix herself. Her mirror-gazing was her attempt to locate a self she felt had never been seen. In her dreams, she was trapped in mirrored boxes, unable to escape her reflection. In other cases, daughters like Grace try to reanimate their dead fathers. Grace had spent years trying to please her distant father, then married a depressed man with an addiction whom Grace was determined to save. Like many daughters, she had unconsciously made it her life's work to bring a dead father figure back to life, sacrificing her own vitality in the process. The dead father effect connects to Carl Jung's concept of the negative father complex. The negative father complex is a powerful, unconscious pattern that binds daughters to their absent fathers. The symptoms of a negative father complex show up as depression, anxiety, and disconnection from the inner compass. Daughters become either overly compliant or rigidly defensive, constantly fearing not being enough. Jung once noted that it's not our parents' intentional actions that affect us most. It's the unspoken, unconscious patterns we absorb. In the case of the dead father, his silence speaks volumes. And unless it's confronted, his psychological absence becomes a daughter's internal truth. Father archetypes. In a biblical story, Judah mistakes his veiled daughter-in-law for a prostitute. He sleeps with her, then condemns her to death for the very act he initiated. This tale illustrates a disturbing psychological pattern. Absent fathers project their own failings onto their daughters and punish them for sins that aren't theirs. Carl Jung saw the father as a major psychological archetype representing authority, law, structure, and reason. It's associated with figures like the ruler, the king, the sky, the wise old man, and even God. When a real father is present and attuned, he becomes a grounding force. But when he's absent, weak, or cold, the archetypal image takes his place. Daughters then inherit its shadow side, inner critics, judges, and saboteurs who hijack their sense of self. These archetypal dynamics often reveal themselves in dreams. Take Aidi, whose father emotionally withdrew after her mother's death. Aidi dreamed of a sadistic father who pursued her and her children with malevolent intent. Her psyche had transformed her father's absence into an internal tyrant. We see the same themes in fairy tales. The miller in Rumpelstiltskin boasts that his daughter can spin straw into gold, putting her life at risk for his financial gain. In The Handless Maiden, a poor father chooses to cut off his daughter's hands rather than sacrifice himself. In these stories, daughters must either escape or lose their souls due to their father's behavior. A related concept is that of the animus, Jung's term for women's inner masculine energy. The animus can be either creative or destructive, depending on how the daughter relates to it. Durrell's story illustrates how a destructive animus can operate. She was raised by a demanding, unsmiling father for whom nothing was ever good enough. Much of the time, she felt angry and full of negative judgments, which she described as toads falling from her mouth. Unconsciously, she had adopted her father's attitudes. Inside, she was constantly berated by a negative animus who demanded she work harder, do more, be more productive. Through therapy, Durrell began to realize how her father was a fraud, like the Wizard of Oz, fake, puny, and hiding behind the curtain of bluster and bravado. The path to healing requires recognizing these internalized patterns and consciously choosing to reject them. Dreams often show the way forward. Aidi's later dreams included helpful figures like a good wizard who could confront evil forces. This figure represented the emergence of protective inner strength. The journey isn't easy. It requires giving up the fantasy of the perfect father. But only by naming what truly happened can a daughter reclaim her voice, her vision, and her life. The as-if personality and the Puella archetype. Some women seem like they have it all together. They're polished, successful, and charming. But look closer, and the cracks begin to show. This charm is practiced, their confidence a costume. Under the surface, they're haunted by a deep sense of emptiness. This is the as-if personality, where a woman performs her life rather than actually living it. Often shaped by an absent or emotionally distant father, she learns to survive by becoming what others want, burying her true self beneath a flawless facade. Psychoanalyst Helene Deutsch identified the as-if personality in the 1940s. As-if individuals appear socially capable and warm on the surface, but lack genuine feeling and connection inside. Often, as-if women are hypersensitive to criticism, desperate to please, and terrified of making mistakes. Tiffany lived in this mode. She was raised by an absent, fear-inducing father and learned to construct her personality from books and careful observation of others. This gave her an extraordinary ability to people-please and avoid conflict, at the cost of losing touch with her authentic self. She never asked for what she needed and was constantly worried about offending someone. Cousin to this pattern is the Puella archetype, the eternal daddy's girl. She remains psychologically frozen in youth, vibrant and dreamy, but trapped in the idealization of her father. She avoids growth, aging, and depth, and instead of developing her own identity, she orients her life around male approval. Jung called this the femme à homme, a woman defined by male projection rather than her own voice. Zoe was one such woman, a self-proclaimed daddy's girl. In therapy, she described her mother's shortcomings and her belief that women were inferior. Her father, she described as flawless. Despite being an accomplished violinist, she let her career lapse in deference to her musician husband. Her dreams often involved grand but empty rooms, a metaphor for her vast potential she couldn't access because of her need for her father's approval. Both Tiffany and Zoe couldn't access real intimacy and creativity. They were blocked by the fear that their true selves weren't enough. Healing in these cases begins with women recovering their authentic selves. Doing that asks them to share their desires and be witnessed. It also requires a descent into the unconscious, into what Jung called the shadow. The shadow is the hidden, repressed side of the self, made up of everything we deny, disown, or cannot yet face. Facing the shadow can be especially difficult for the Puella, who holds on to an image of herself as a faultless child. But she and the as-if woman must both face the grief, rage, and betrayal left by their absent fathers. They must separate their own voices from the internalized voices of the men who never really saw them. Healing the absence. Rana's autoimmune disease brought her thriving career to a sudden halt. But it wasn't just her immune system that had turned on her body. It was a lifetime of emotional neglect coming to the surface. Her body had learned to treat itself as the enemy, much like her psyche had long been trained to reject her own needs after years of feeling unseen by her father. Autoimmune conditions disproportionately affect women, accounting for nearly 79% of all cases. This staggering number suggests more than biology. It points to a deeper link between emotional wounding and psychological illness. When a father is absent or emotionally disengaged, a daughter may internalize that rejection so completely that her own immune system begins to treat her as the enemy. Rana lived this disconnect. She grew up without affection, care, or even touch from her father. Her body, never acknowledged, became something to ignore, punish, or push past. She forgot how to care for it, how to rest, eat, listen. So when autoimmune illness finally struck, it forced her to reckon with the hollowness she had been carrying for decades. Psychoanalyst Julia Kristeva's concept of the abject helps explain this dynamic. The abject represents the parts of ourselves we reject but can't escape. For daughters of absent fathers, the body often becomes abject, something to transcend or punish rather than nurture. Daughters develop a body mask that they perform behind. Symptoms like insomnia, disordered eating, and a persistent numbness often follow. Healing from this kind of wounding involves what Jungian psychology calls confronting the negretto, a descent into darkness, decomposition, and loss of bearings. This isn't about reconciliation. It's about betrayal of the old father-daughter script. It means abandoning inherited images of femininity built on patriarchal ideals, killing off the internalized father image and reclaiming a self that never had space to fully emerge. The ultimate goal isn't necessarily happiness. Instead, it's authorship. French feminist Simone de Beauvoir described it as reaching a point where everything was possible, because there was finally everything to be done. That's what healing can look like. One woman in her 60s dreamed of being surrounded by ancient books and modern technology, eager to explore them all. This symbolizes how the devastation of father absence can transform into an insatiable curiosity for life's possibilities. Through conscious gathering of the psyche, a daughter can finally fill the absence and feel entirely at home in her own body. When a daughter holds the tension between what was and what could be, she begins to write a new story, not in reaction to loss, but in relationship with her full self. Through psychological integration and somatic awareness, she returns home to her body and claims the right to live from within it. The main takeaway of this Blink 2, The Absent Father Effect by Susan E. Schwartz, is that a father's emotional absence can leave lasting wounds on a daughter's psyche, shaping her identity, body, and relationships. Daughters may internalize their rejection. As a consequence, perform as if lives, idealize their fathers, or repeat abandonment patterns. Healing from a father's absence begins not with reconciliation, but with facing the shadow, grieving the loss, and reclaiming authorship of the self. By integrating what was lost or denied, a woman can move from performance to presence and fully inhabit her own voice and body. That's it for this Blink. We hope you enjoyed it. If you have a moment, please take the time to leave us a rating. We always appreciate your feedback. And I'll see you in the next Blink.